Hi again, everyone. I was asked to give a few bits of advice on doing the French folk song, which is the first full song that you do after you get your black belt. Of course, right after getting black belt, then you're doing some scales and some rhythms with those scales. So the French folk song is the first true song that comes after that, because scales aren't really considered songs in that regard. So there are a few things that we try to do once we get past black belt. The first is to get used to not seeing as many colors on the page, because ultimately everything's just going to be black and white. So we won't get any kind of extra clues about, is it the first finger, is it not the first finger, etc. Excuse me. And also we're starting to get used to not relying on the colors on the instrument as well. Again, because ultimately it will have none, no tapes of any kind. So the songs that we do after black belt are that transition between the beginning reading music in this method and ultimately reading music as a professional would. So with no tapes or colors of any kind, and everything that's on the page is just black and white. So those are the two main goals with it. Now, in addition to that, this is something that I think is very important. It's why I included in my method. It's not often done in other methods, but I think it really is a good idea. Otherwise, I wouldn't do it. Is anytime you learn a song, you're going to learn it in two keys. In other words, you're going to learn it starting on two different notes. You're going to learn it with two sets of fingerings, but they're basically the same song. So an example would be when you did brown belt, you did Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. And then for black belt, you did the exact same song, Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star, right? It's same song, but a little higher sound overall. And that's what we're doing here. And for one reason is because we want to get used to playing songs in different keys, right? So we have a little bit of flexibility. But also one of the things that, especially for violin and viola, but cello as well, uh, we have to start making distinctions between. In other words, telling the difference between is when we're going to use the green tape for or the yellow tape. The green tape for the high second finger for violin or viola, or the third finger for cello, and the yellow tape being the low second finger for violin and viola, or just the second finger for cello. And these are designed to do that. So if you're looking at your part for the French folk song, you notice that the only colors that you do see, aside from black and white, are notes that are either green or yellow. And the way that I have most often done these next few songs is to have the first song will have mostly greens, the second song will have mostly yellows. In other words, you won't have songs, it's not like Red Belt, the Tumbleweeds, where you were doing the same, you were doing both colors within the same song. So where it says D major and then in brackets it says F sharp and C sharp, the green notes are the F sharp, the D string second finger, or for violin and viola, third finger for cello, or on the A string, the same idea. That note, that green tape is called the C sharp. Whereas if you look at the one below, where it says C major, it says F, and then that's called a natural sign. It looks a lot like a sharp, but it's called a natural sign for F natural and C natural. So we're using yellow. So we will expect to see yellow notes if we're going to see any color at all. And in a few songs, we're going to start looking at how we get that information from something called a key signature, which is information that we see at the very beginning of the line, of each line, that will tell us that instead of simply seeing colors. So all of this is really just to say, we want to get used to playing in certain keys with certain finger patterns, certain combinations, etc., and to start reading those differences, but also start playing them with the proper placement of the fingers. And one thing that we look at is what fingers end up, especially for violin and viola, what fingers end up touching. So if you're starting the D major version, you've got, and I'm going to use this in terms of violin and viola fingers, because cellos don't think in terms of what fingers touch. No fingers touch in cello. You're starting with three fingers on the A string, and going playing three of those, and then going to three green tape notes. Those are called C sharps. And if we're doing it right, our second and third fingers are touching. So we have what's called a half step between 3 fingers and 2 fingers. Right? Those notes are very, very close in sound. Very close in sound. And on my instrument, they actually are touching. This is violin, so this is my A string. On viola, it would be over here. They're right next to each other. And that's how I know I'm doing it right. That's how I know that the distance between them is the right distance. They could both possibly be wrong, but at least to each other, they are in the right spot. So I try to place my third finger in the right spot, and then my second finger will be in exactly the right spot too. If I do the C major version, I'm starting on the yellow. That's my low 2. Now, if you think about the D major version that I just played, the half step was between the third finger, which is the first measure, and the second finger, which is the second measure. In the C major version, there should still be a half step between the notes of the first measure and the notes of the second measure, except now I'm starting on that second finger. So we call it, that's the low 2. Right? We've done a lot of those so far. So if I'm viola, I put my first finger where that first tape is, what used to be the red tape, and then my second finger right next to it. That's the yellow. You should still have yellow at this point. And if on violin, it would be one string over. So if I play the same beginning of the song there, here's my second finger and first finger. Again, very, very close in sound and also touching, right? They're just like 2 and 3 were touching in the D major version, 1 and 2 touch. So one of the things that we're seeing is what makes this song sound like the song is where you have fingers touching and where you don't. It's where the half steps are make a big difference. Now, the whole D major version is based on the D major scale, which was the exercise that we did just prior to this. It's almost all scale. I mean, there are places where it kind of breaks the scale up into little units and repeats them or kind of mixes them up a little bit. But for the most part, it's overall the scale, except you happen to be coming down the scale to begin with. So here's the D major version. This one is probably the easier of the two, so I'll just play it through. There's a long note and a rest. Another half step. Long note and a rest. And a rest. And then the last line is just a scale. With 2 extra notes at the end. Okay? So, like I said, there's a lot of scale patterns in there. The third and fourth line, we notice we have these little 3-note patterns that keep repeating, right? D1, 2, D1, 2, D1, 2, right? There's a repetition to that. Or if we're using letter names, D, E, F sharp, D, E, F sharp. And then the fourth line does the same thing. It just starts up. It starts on the first finger, but then 1, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And I'm mentioning this because when we go to the C major version, we want to apply some of the things we learned in the D major to save us time, like I said, to help us figure out exactly what it should sound like. So the C major version, like I say, it's got the low 2s for violin and viola, or it uses the second finger for cello instead of the third. And it still has those scale patterns. We're going to run into a little bit of a problem when we get to the end of the second line. So I'm going to play the first 2 lines, and when I get to that last note, then we'll discuss what that is. So again, I start second finger, the yellow tape on the A string. And I have to go to the third finger on the D string there, or the blue tape, I should say. Then here's another low 2 because it's yellow, but this time on the D string. And then I have a problem because my next note is lower than my open D. So if you're thinking, well, then maybe I should go to a lower string, you're correct, but it's only 1 step lower. So which means it's my third finger on the G string. So from D, 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 and this is called a C also. That third finger, or the third finger for violin and viola, fourth finger for cello. The blue tape, or since you don't really have the tape, you think, oh well, it used to be blue, right? The tape that used to be blue, the tape formerly known as blue. Whenever we see a note that's one, and this was something we learned actually going all the way back to Old MacDonald. Anytime you have a note that is one step lower than an open string, it's always that, third finger or fourth finger, a third finger for violin, viola, fourth finger for cello on the string below it. Okay, and that's the only note that you have to play here. That's not on the D or the A string. Once you've got that, then you're pretty much set. That's the only new note that we have in this. When you start the third line, you see that it starts on that exact same line. For violin, it's the line below the staff, and actually for violin, it's a little easier to tell. Notes on the G string always have the ledger lines, the extra lines below the staff. We just have to remember to use 3 fingers if it's got that one line through it. For viola, it's the middle line, and so the end of the second line ends with that note, and the first note of the third line, measure 9, starts with a note in that same place. So I found it. I already have my starting point, and now I see I have these little 3-note pattern again. And here's a yellow, and this line starts a note higher, back up to the D string. Then the last line is my scale again, but again I'm starting on my second finger on the yellow tape, and then coming down from there. Another yellow. Here's the note. Right? And again, we get used to calling them by their letter names as well. So that's a C is what that's referred to, because on the G string, if this is violin or viola, G, A, B, C, right? We're coming up 3 letters above G in our musical alphabet. If we're thinking just in terms of fingering, third finger on the G string, or the blue tape on the G string, or what was the blue tape on the G string. So I hope that helps. And again, you're going to see a lot of this. One song has the green, one song has the yellow. From this point forward, you'll see a little bit less and less of the colors with each one, and we will eventually change the yellow and green tape on the instrument as well. But I want to get those 2 notes really, really in the right place, because those are often played in the wrong spot by people just learning. So hope that helps, and please send me an email and let me know if there's anything else I can help you with. Thanks.